sure many of you are familiar with the saying, ignorance is bliss. However, I was always confronted with the thought that whoever stated this statement was themselves not ignorant. So how would they themselves know that ignorance was bliss if it took non-ignorance to understand the statement itself? How could you perceive unconsciousness or ignorance if you yourself are not so? Well, it's a lot like ignorant intelligence. How can something be ignorantly intelligent? You know, growing up, you may have heard the T-Rex has the brain the size of a walnut. And so it was a stupid beast, blundering around and incapable of rational and critical thinking. However, what is it that we gauge intelligence off of? I mean, is intelligence the mere capability and ability itself to survive in an environment? Because is not intelligence relative to the environment we find ourselves within? T-Rex himself or herself may have been intelligent in regards to the notion that it was an effective predator within the time and the place that it was within. And so in this sense, it was intelligent because it was very capable of sustaining a viable platform of life and not necessarily struggling, so to speak, in regards to a viable platform of life. And so what is intelligence? I mean, I could say in this regards or in this sense, a blade of grass is intelligent because it utilizes the conditions that are present and it is able to fulfill a life cycle, and it is able to effectively utilize the resources around it to procreate, to reproduce, to grow, and to overcome the conditions that it finds itself within. You know, I really like the saying, never judge the intelligence of a fish on its ability to climb a tree. Because you put the fish in water and the fish is able to utilize its surroundings in a very effective manner. Whereas, you know, you take something like a lemur and you stick it in a tree and it can maneuver through the limbs as though itself is swimming like a fish through water. And so how is it that we gauge intelligence? Is it on something's ability to adapt? Well, in that case, we can look at an organism like the water bear, who has been shown to have highly adaptive biochemistry in that it can survive in such a wide range of environments itself. So is this, in a sense, a highly intelligent organism, where many people may merely look at it as some microscopic bug? Or is intelligence the ability to not change over a large period of time, such as is the case with organisms like the cone jellyfish or an alligator, right? These organisms haven't changed over a profoundly significant amount of time. So is this an exercise of intelligence in that they have achieved such a structural organization of their morphology and physiology and of their chemistry that they show high intelligence due to the fact that they haven't had to change over an immense period of time? You know, in a lot of ways, people regard intelligence as, you know, how big is his head? Well, A whale can dive into depths beyond that of man, and yet we look at such a blundering beast as just that, a blundering beast. When if we merely change what it means to be intelligent, we can see intelligence all around us, and not necessarily just the ratio of the cavity within our skulls to the rest of the proportions of our body itself as being the ultimate form of intelligence that we know today. And there you have it. That's how ignorance can be intelligence. And in a lot of ways, ignorant things prey upon intelligent things. Let's look at our society today to understand this principle. How can something that's ignorant prey upon something that's intelligent? Well, again, you may call yourself somebody who is intelligent, but you may yourself be in a lot of ways a slave to people who you feel have an inferior intelligence to you. Yet, due to the fact that you are supporting them in their way of life, in a sense, somebody who is more ignorant than you are is taking advantage of your intelligence. And so, are you truly that intelligent? And is intelligence merely the ability to notice that you yourself should restrict yourself to a certain environment? I mean, a fish knows not to go out of water, just as a lemur knows not to swim in the depths of the ocean. And just as Albert Einstein would probably get wrecked in the boxing ring, yet Manny Pacquiao wasn't going to design us, Orion 1 to travel to Mars. And so there you have it. Again, what is intelligence? Then you could say, well, true intelligence is the ability to recognize where it is that you are intelligent yourself. To know the environment in which you can perform at your best. And in doing so, you are expressing intelligence. Now, again, we could say, is intelligence based upon survivability? And, if human beings truly are the most intelligent thing, and I think that it's likely that in a lot of ways we're possibly the most intelligent thing in the cosmos itself. I mean, if you look at the grand nature of statistics and probability and take into consideration the evidence which has shown itself around our universe, it's not too far-fetched to come to the notion that human beings as a species are quite possibly the most intelligent thing in the universe. I mean, we have pretty much the ability to alter our environment, which in a lot of ways has its ups and its downs, because we ourselves, just like all other things, are intelligent in a certain environment. But it's kind of funny, we manipulate our surroundings to take with us our environment in which we're the most intelligent in. And so in a way, is that the most intelligence? Like I was stating before, don't gauge a fish on its ability to climb a tree on how intelligent it is. But in a lot of ways, people express intelligence because we can take our environment with us. Like, for example, I can build a submarine and take an environment in which I myself can express intelligence within because it fits within my morphology and of my physical characteristics to allow me to perform. And I can set this environment in a very hostile environment, such as the depths of the ocean. Or, the ability to influence nature as we know it, to change the structure of a tree on the cellular and molecular level, or other organisms to that extent. Or to possibly, derail some astrological celestial object from impacting that which is my environment, which would cause a cease of life as we know it. Well, intelligence, just like many other things, is entirely relative, and intelligence, it seems, can be intelligence based upon how it is that you spin it or how it is that you want to see it, just like a lot of other things in life. So there you have it. Are you yourself ignorantly intelligent? I want to talk a little bit about the word profound and what it actually means. Well, let's break it down a little bit and let's discover its root makeup, and in just dissecting its parts we may gain a greater sense of the whole. So, found. What does it mean to find? Well, find is similar to discover. And in discovering something, it means that we're coming across it for the very first time. And in finding something, we're, in a sense, rediscovering something which was once lost but is now found. And so something which is profound is, in a sense, rediscovering something which has been lost, or in another sense is unknown. And we're bringing it back to the senses. We're bringing it back to the forefront of the mind. And in doing so, we achieve some sense of euphoria and an enlightened moment where we can glimpse into the significant nature of even simple things. However, simple things arranged in a complex orientation can make up something that's very profound. And so how can somebody be profoundly stupid? And it sounds a little bit like an oxymoron, kind of like jumbo shrimp or something to that extent. However, I'll explain to you exactly how somebody can be profoundly stupid. Well, it takes somebody very, very special to be profoundly stupid, because what you're saying is that they're stupid beyond stupid. And it's kind of a little bit ironic and a little bit of a paradox and contradiction, because for somebody to be stupid in the first place means that they, can't necessarily eloquently express an idea. Maybe they aren't necessarily capable of performing tasks which you deem to be very simple. However, for somebody to be profoundly stupid, it means that they're stupid beyond that. And it kind of takes away a little bit from stupidity, because in a sense, they almost have to be able to eloquently describe something, but in their description, they fail to actually grasp the concept which they're conceiving, and they fail to express the idea or notion in its true form. And by doing so, they're profound in a sense, but they're profoundly stupid because they're missing the mark. It's like they're able to pick up the bow, but when they go to draw back, somehow the arrow goes straight up into the air and comes right back down onto their head and kills themselves. And the feat in itself is quite amazing, and that's why it's profound. but it's very stupid at the same point in time, because it's like, wow, you're such an idiot that, you know, in your discussion and in your topic, you actually destroyed what it was that you're speaking about all at the same moment. And it's almost like an idiot savant, where it's like they don't necessarily understand themselves what it is that they're doing, but they do it better than anybody else who understands. And so, you know, that person who shot the arrow straight up in the air and it comes straight back down and kills them in an instant, you know, fatal strike, is something which would take a master, you know, it'd be quite the task for somebody who was very proficient with the bow. And so it's like, you're an idiot, but you're a profound idiot, because you're doing something that's so idiotic that it's beyond stupid. But by being beyond stupid, it's in a way profound, because we're rediscovering, in a sense, that what it is that we deem to be enlightenment or a sense of euphoria is achieved by a task or somebody in which has, you know, no right to be doing so. And so we're, in a sense, overwhelmed at the fact that they actually achieved what it was that they did. And this, in a sense, provides us with the sense of discovery, which is making the moment profound. And so they're profoundly stupid, because as we observe, we catch glimpses of genius, but then we also notice that the genius is merely a flaw of idiocy. And so it's like, you know, instead of the saying being, there's a fine line between insanity and genius, you know, there's a fine line between ignorance and genius, where somebody who is totally oblivious to what it is that they're actually accomplishing. And so in the oblivious nature in which we observe them, we're like, they don't even realize that what they're doing is quite amazing. However, they still accomplish it. And they do so on a regular manner, which makes them profoundly idiotic. And there you go. As you watch this video, you might have yourself thought, this character is a profound idiot, because he rambles on about 2 words and is able to dissect the word into something which possibly has no relation to the word itself, and express it in a way which has no relation to what it truly means, and give us a story onto how it relates to a sense of euphoria in our life, when in reality he's just blabbering on about nothing. So there you have it. Profoundly idiotic. Have a great day, everybody. Who was first? And am I the first to ever make a video titled Who Was First? If I look at the immensity of the world itself, in most cases, we're not necessarily the first to do something in which we're experiencing. However, it may be the first time for us. And in this, we can discover and find out that even old things can they themselves be new to those who are discovering them for the first time. And so in a lot of ways, you're always first, because it is your first time. And if you gauge experience solely upon what it is that you've experienced, then all things you experience are a first. Whether it's even the second or third time that you're experiencing them, because it's your first, second time experiencing it. it's your first third time experiencing it, and so forth and so on. Whatever you experience is always your first time, no matter how many times you've done it, because whatever time you're doing it is your first time experiencing it in that time. So before I confuse myself any further with dialect, which is meant to create a sense of understanding by, in a way, causing confusion by using looped words in a circular manner, which hopefully come out straight, I'll get to the point. And the point being that who was first? And, you know, a lot of people around the face of the planet always like to look at things in a very linear manner rather than a cyclical one. And in a lot of ways, it's for mere means of practical application and for practical experience. You know, I'm not going to go around citing every other time that somebody came to the American continent throughout the vast history that it itself has been around for. It's not necessarily practical. A lot of people stick with just the Columbus story because it's in a lot of ways practical. It gets very confusing, just like I was stating before, when you take into all considerations all the different peoples that they themselves have, you know, discovered the New World. Because there's definitely evidence for interaction between Egyptians in the New World, between the Vikings in the New World, and between other civilizations in the New World. And so, which one is it that we adhere to? Well, in a lot of ways, it's the one which is the most recent, because we're able to identify with it more so than things which are more prehistoric. So the ones which are more recent rather than ancient are more so on our mind and our thought, and we're able to apply them towards a sense of history rather than something which we don't identify with due to the fact that it's beyond our time, so to speak. So we stick with one linear pathway rather than acknowledging that there were many firsts and there were many that came before. And in a lot of ways, this statement also applies to many different discoveries and many different establishments and organizations around the planet. You know, when you look at democracy, which the U.S. itself isn't necessarily a democratic nation, which I think it's ironic because most people accuse it as being such within the system itself without realizing that it's not. But anyways, when it was established, there were definitely instances which it was established upon. And it was the first of its time in regards to the conditions in which it found itself within. And in a lot of ways, I think that it needs to be re-engineered to be more suitable towards the time we find ourselves within at the moment, because it's not necessarily something which was built to house the organism that it's become. And so it's almost like the skin needs to shed it, or the snake needs to shed its skin because it's kind of outgrown the old skin, so to speak. And so, you know, like the hermit crab that needs to find a new shell because it no longer fits within the shell that it was once housed within. It needs to find a new one and become first in another direction. Well, this video has become pretty stupid because it's like, I thought I was going to be able to like come up with something cool to talk about who was first, but now I'm realizing it was like kind of dumb. But anyways, I'm just going to keep walking and talking. You never know. You never know when there's going to be like a thought when it's like, hey, that was like a cool thought. That was a cool way to express something. I'm never going to be able to replicate or duplicate the way that I said that before, kind of like organically, on the moment, on the spot. You know, it's like browsing through goods. It's like you kind of got to browse through all of them before you come across something that you actually deem as a good. And so, I don't know. Firsts are dumb. Who's always first? Light was always first. Because if it wasn't before you, then how was it that you could see what's going on around you? That was kind of cool. If anybody just sits here and watches this while I'm nonchalantly just walking down the road, tapping a rock out of my shoe, then I commend you for doing so. You must really be bored. And I hope I can provide some sense of entertainment and experience and joy while you're doing so. Or whatever type of feeling you want to feel. I don't know. I don't even know what type of aura it is that I put off. It's kind of hard to try and analyze yourself. It's like, how is it that I really come across? Or what sense of feeling is it that I give off? That's your aura. People try to make things like so mystical sometimes. And it's like when you talk about aura, all you're really talking about is personality. But there is some kind of cool discussion involved within auras themselves, because humans and a lot of other creatures and organisms have what is called the biosphere, you know, and when you look at things on the cellular and molecular and chemical levels, there are a lot of interactions going on which you're unconscious to, and they're involuntary. It doesn't necessarily take thought to act upon them. Like, for example, your heartbeat. You know, it utilizes magnetics and electrical impulses through, what is it, the SA node and the AV node, to actually incite your heart to beat at a certain rhythm. And by your heart beating and by the charge of your blood, you yourself are actually creating a biosphere, a biomagnetically charged field around your body. And it's actually kind of a fairly cool thing to look into, because it's like you look at the different layers of the earth, and it's all, you know, the earth has an atmosphere, and in a lot of ways the term aura could be interchangeable with the term atmosphere, because what type of atmosphere do I house? And the earth has many layers to its atmosphere, just like people have many layers to their atmosphere. And in a lot of ways, people have many layers to their personality. And the aura which they radiate, their ambiance, the feeling that they give others. And in doing so, it creates the atmosphere, which you almost kind of have to get through before you can communicate or find something which is habitable or, you know, sustainable around certain people. And so, you know, in a lot of ways, people are like little celestial bodies kind of walking around. You know, people give off light in a lot of ways, like through words and through, you know, giving things meaning beyond what it was they thought they were merely before, and by giving us understanding, which allows us to grow, which is very similar to a lot of ways that the sun and stars give off light, which is something very interesting to kind of dive into, because, you know, things utilize light all around us to provide them with growth, to provide them with life. And in many ways, it's just like a sensory interaction, where it's, you know, human beings require sensory input to actually have a good quality of life and to provide us with like a sense of growth. So it's almost like sunlight and light itself is providing us with some sort of feeling or pleasurable sense, which gives us the sense of life that we experience, because it allows us to receive information. And in the reception of information, we're able to digest this information and we're able to grow. And so in a lot of ways, people themselves give off light that we're able to digest and we're able to learn and grow from, which is life. And you know, some people absorb this information more so than what it is that they give off. And some people give off more of this information more so than what it is that they themselves absorb. And so there you have it. You know, what is your company, so to speak, your solar system, right? It's like, who is the one that's shedding the light and all the others are organized around? And who is the one that's kind of feeding the system and providing it with organization, which everybody else orbits? And whatnot. You know, astronomy and astrology are kind of cool fields, because it's like the more you invest in it, the more it actually like engulfs you, and the more of an effect it actually has on you. Because the more you invest into something, think of you, like you, the actual act of investing your thought and brain power into something actually allows it to grow. And so how does that work? Well, let's say that you yourself were to look up the term astronomy. You're investing what? Your time into it. And originally it was just one word, astronomy. However, the moment you invest your time into it, one word grows into many words to describe the one word. And so it's grown due to your investment. Just like many people invest money into things to see them grow, and so that they can possibly receive some sort of beneficial outcome from the growth that which they invested their time and money into itself becomes, you know, part of their growth as well. And so there we see another example as to how certain words and meanings of things can transcend into other facets and areas of space. But by doing so, we're able to kind of break down the cut and dry way in which many people see the world, and we're able to provide it with a new sense of light, which almost makes it seem more of a living thing rather than something itself, which is so cut and dry and, you know, just numbers on a piece of paper. It's actually something which we ourselves can communicate with and have a lot more control in regards to what it is that grows around us, and in that way how we ourselves grow, showing that, you know, we're a very connected part to this whole system and thing that we call life. And I bet I wasn't the first to ever describe something in those terms, but this was definitely my first time doing so during this time. Stupid, right? Firsts. Maybe there are actually some like true firsts where it's like, you know, this is the first. This is one of the first times that I don't even know if I'm gonna upload this video or not, because it's like there's like some good things in it and it's like, dang. But the majority of it is just nothing. I don't know, maybe there's some good background white noise of birds chirping and sunlight and clouds and sky and whatever. So maybe it's worth it in that sense, rather than trying to have some euphoric thought, you know, present itself, which didn't necessarily come to fruition this time around. And it wouldn't be the first time that that ever occurred either. It's a quiet Sunday. The birds, as they chirp beyond where it is that I find myself, I almost find myself being connected to the bird which is chirping. As if, in some sense, my internal being is expressing my external world and allowing me to distinguish the moment that is today and the moment that is this moment, and to characterize it beyond others and give it a sense of self and a sense of position within a timeline. Or does a timeline really have a place? Profoundly stupid. So, you know, and then if it's like, if I sit here on this rock long enough, then maybe it's like what it was that I originally thought of will present itself within my mind once more, and I'll be able to express it fully. But then should I like edit out all the portions which led up to that moment and just merely showcase that moment? I don't necessarily know. It's like a lot of my intentions with these videos are to give people, make things which are mundane, you know, express the extraordinary character which they intrinsically express every day. You know, notice the magic in day-to-day life, but in a lot of ways, to kind of fan that flame, you have to really try to express things in a different way, which allows you to see the profound nature of something when it's just something that's kind of ordinary, you know? And so in doing so, it allows you to see things almost like you're a child again, because when you're a child, everything is so new and everything is so like amazing. Every movie and experience and sound that you hear and everything that you see is like a profound moment, and just the experience that you gain from doing so, like as you get older, is really hard to try and to reacquire that sense of exploration and that sense of discovery upon things that today may seem so ordinary and just regular in our daily experience. And so it's almost like we have to trick ourselves into expressing it in a way in which is new, but still expresses the same ideal. And by doing this, it allows us to almost gain a sense of what it was to be a child again, because it's almost beyond us. And, by speaking in such terms and in a manner which is complex, you're able to almost make the simple things complex again, and in doing so, almost make them new again, and to gain that sense of what it was to be a child again, where everything is new and everything's just such an enlightened experience, and everything's miraculous. But we kind of lose that as things just become mundane. So it's almost trying to recreate that initial experience, that experience of something being first, It's kind of ironic that people strive to be first in a lot of things, because if you look at it as, in a lot of ways, the people that were necessarily first don't necessarily gain the benefits of those who came last, because the founders had to deal with a lot of issues and circumstances which, whether it's a discovery in a new area of knowledge or a lot of things, they don't necessarily gain the benefit of the discovery itself, other than being attributed with the discovery. However, the total fruition of the new area of knowledge and its implications, which would otherwise benefit its benefactor, aren't necessarily ever, seen as fruit which is able to be eaten by the person that was first. It's usually those who come after that are able to eat the fruit from the tree, not necessarily the person that planted the tree itself. And so it's like, why do we strive to be first? Is it because he who was first is remembered last, or remembered until the last? But he who was last isn't necessarily remembered by anybody in the lineage of the experience itself. And so our mere means of trying to achieve first is our ability to be remembered up until the last. Just a mere means of our ego to kind of hold on to our world around us through remembrance of what it was that we were and what it was that we did. Well, it's kind of been nice just sitting here in the sunlight and letting it soak into my skin, and talking itself, even though if you're not necessarily talking about anything, is still quite refreshing, and allows you to really become a lot better at speaking. And doing it in this format allows you to, in a lot of ways, overcome the obstacle of not necessarily being in a position where you gain the opportunity to speak to public peoples or individuals without seeming, like somebody who is out of their gourd, because there is still the likely chance that somebody is viewing this and listening to this, and I am utilizing this conversation to towards my own personal growth and possibly towards somebody else's as well, which allows me to kind of overcome the fact that I'm not necessarily just walking around outside talking to myself. And then, in a lot of ways, will allow me to be better the next time that I'm actually speaking to somebody or speaking alone. Who knows? Yeah, whatever. See you later. I think I've sat around long enough not talking about anything. Possibly one of the strangest innovations or movements within the history of mankind as we know it is through the implementation of moving pictures. And what I mean by that is think about what it was that preceded the technology itself. I mean, truly, to experience images outside of reality itself before the technology was invented would only occur in instances such as dreaming or through imagination, where everything that you saw visually with your senses through the perception of sight was reality. And if it wasn't reality, then it was a dream. However, with the introduction of technology such as moving pictures comes this whole new field where people must further separate reality in their waking life with yet another nuance to life itself, which in a lot of ways causes a state of much more mass confusion and of delusional thought through entertainment, where the boundaries and borders between what it is deemed to be waking life and reality are somewhat skewed and obscured by technology. And we can digress through history and see that in a lot of ways this experience itself would have only been manifest through things such as storytelling, where a group of individuals themselves would have only experienced, a sense of visual euphoria in regards to a story when everybody was sitting around, the campfire, and you had a very good orator who could express ideas in a manner which would enable everybody within the group to have somewhat of the same experience, to, in a way, direct their minds to visualize the same things, so that in a sense, even though everybody in life has a different experience, for this one moment in time, they were able to almost experience things from the same point of view. And this in a lot of ways occurs with books, in which as we read books and as we visualize what the words truly mean through the descriptive use utilized by the author, we're able to imagine and picture the story as we read along with the words, and we transform the words into images, and images which in a lot of ways are relatable only to the experiences that we ourselves have experienced within life. So through this technological innovation that was moving pictures, we're able to almost in a way connect all of our brain stems to one another, and in a sense dream with each other so that we can visualize the same thing and we can all experience something together as almost one body would. And, you know, when you're watching a film, it's very odd because when you yourself are immersed within film, it's almost like somebody is hijacking your senses. And though you're staring at a screen, it's like somebody has plugged in the cord which leads to their camera into your optical nerves. And in a sense, the camera is now your eyes. And you're seeing exactly what it is that the director is directing you towards. And you know, that's why somebody who is a very good director is able to draw people's attention to certain details and to, in a way, create an environment which allows a large group of individuals to see the same perspective. And you know, it's a very odd thing because, like I said before this really was a technological movement or something that was popularized or normalized throughout society, really the only way in which you would have seen visions to this degree would have been, you know, through some sense of imaginative thought or within dreams themselves. And now it's like, in a way, we're able to experience things which are unrealistic to the extreme while we ourselves are still awake in reality. And it's like, even though the thing we're experiencing itself is fake, this fake thing holds a part within our true history. And so, in a sense, our true history is in part fake, even though it's true. And it's just a very odd way to really think about it. But in that odd way to think about it, it doesn't really diminish the fact of what is actually really going on. And so, there you have it. One of the most odd and intriguing events which occurs on a day-to-day basis that you wouldn't normally have thought to have been odd because it's so regular and normal now. However, if you really take the time to digest the intricacies which present themselves in regards to such a technology, then what you find is that something which we perceive to necessarily, you know, be normal isn't necessarily normal itself in regards to the overwhelming expanse that has been human history. So there you have it, one of the most intriguing and odd things which we partake in on a day-to-day basis. And as always, thanks for watching, and like and tune in again next time. The pineal gland, sacred geometry, and the third eye. Well now, where to begin in this whole nuance of mental math, so to speak, in regards towards recognizing the esoteric and mystical functions of these things and how they actually have practical application within our daily lives. You'll see a lot of representations about this information in a lot of different areas and sources which really emphasize the esoteric and, you know, the mystical sensation and origin between these things and these facets of knowledge in relation to day-to-day life. Well, if we actually really truly look at their practical and their understood meaning today, it actually doesn't necessarily negate the magical sensation in which they still provide without necessarily adding something that isn't really there to try to give it something so magical and esoteric. And for example, let's look at the pineal gland. The pineal gland itself is understood to be in charge of the circadian rhythm and also hormonal balance in regards to your interaction with and desire towards the opposite sex. Well, as the pineal gland itself releases melatonin and regulates your sleep patterns, sleep itself is a very odd thing and has been highly correlated to mystical and esoteric meanings as we enter into the dream realm. And we ourselves find ourselves in a place which seems unrealistic at times and seems to be in which not only can we have out-of-body experiences, in a way we can control what we perceive to be the physical universe. And I don't know about you, but I've had many dreams where either I can fly or I can physically manifest things just by the mere act of thought itself. And in a lot of ways, I realize this within a dream. Hey, I'm dreaming, but I'm still able to maintain the dream itself. And, I go along with this whole charade and I'm able to kind of manifest that which I want and to actually orient and to pretty much be the one who writes the play, but am still in the play itself while in a way experiencing it as it is something that's beyond my control, when in actuality I'm controlling it. And it's very fascinating. And so there's no, real wonder as to why people associated such mystical and esoteric meanings behind dreams themselves, and where we perceive images outside of our day-to-day life and try to associate these images, with certain regards to meanings and certain regards to having meaning beyond the mere act of gaining rest. It has almost a spiritual sensation to it, where we can see beyond where, we are ourselves within the universe and be able to more accurately depict the ebb and flow of the ethereal world that pervades the universe itself. And a lot of people think that, when you enter into the dream cycle, you yourself are kind of interacting on a new dimensional plane where you can kind of understand and interact with things beyond, the physical realm that we find ourselves in today through a mere means of only through physical action, and vast distances of space between you and other individuals can, in a sense, be realized. Well, now let's look at something that's actually highly fascinating in relation to what is going on here. And we're not necessarily going to make up a lot of information, but we're going to just present it in a way which causes you to critically think about the world that surrounds you, and possibly how, in a lot of ways, tools become extensions of the internal mechanisms within your body itself. And so, the pineal gland itself is directly associated in a lot of ways to the sleep cycle. And what actions do we actually go through on a day-to-day basis today which are relatable to, in a lot of ways, sleeping and dreaming and having visions in a sense which are kind of beyond, our immediate surroundings, and in a lot of ways aren't necessarily true or real, and requires a lot of faith to actually exercise the belief that it's a reality going on. Well, one instance that this actually takes place within is through what I like to call, telepathic communication. And that may seem a little esoteric and mystical. However, let me de-spiritualize this statement, and let's just call it communication by means of an electrical device which transforms electrical impulses that I am converting into, vibrational frequencies and waves, which this device then actually converts these frequencies into an electromagnetic frequency, which is picked up by a receiver, amplified, retransmitted, picked up by an antenna, retransformed into some form of information which the brain of the other individual can then perceive and can then understand, in which causes some sort of reaction within them. Whatever it is that I'm speaking causes the reaction. And how did this whole initial pathway of events actually begin and take place? It was through the mere act of thought itself, and of orienting my thought towards a certain goal, and then actually acting upon this thought. So, telepathic communication, though in a lot of ways is seen as, some mystical, witch with her crystal ball, kind of viewing through the looking glass, so to speak, at somebody at a distant point in time, or place that, they aren't necessarily themselves there to witness, but they're utilizing magic to do so. And in a lot of ways, a lot of people agree that magic is merely a misunderstood form of science. And then if I tell you that in a lot of ways, your mind is kind of connected to all of reality, because all of reality is merely an extension of energy and of matter. And the external world is merely kind of like the physical manifestation of your internal reality itself, where the two hold almost a dual relationship. And I could get into genetics and the environment and where you're at because of certain things that are internal mechanisms on the molecular and the genetic level, and going down to the atomic level, where these devices, such as a cellular telephone or telephone, actually operate on principles which are showcased in a lot of magical and esoteric scenes. Right? We have the crystal ball. Well, in a lot of ways, oscillating crystals in a circuit actually convert what it is that we want to communicate into a form of information which can be communicated and then picked up and received by somebody else who's resonating at the same frequency as us. And in a lot of ways, these actions, when we're communicating with these electrical devices, mimic, in a lot of ways, sleep patterns and whatnot. And in a lot of ways, are very similar to, the brainwave functions that we'll see on such as an MRI, when we go into these states of consciousness where we're interacting with devices which allow us to almost perform a magical feat and a spiritual feat, where we're communicating with somebody across vast distances by, oscillating and vibrating crystals and frequencies and waves. And they kind of have to be on the same plane of consciousness as us to be able to receive this information as well. And if you look at it that way, it's actually scientific and not so mystical, but in no way is it not magical. And even though it's practical, applicable, and down to earth, a little bit out in space, so to speak, because, science is kind of that way anyways. That's why scientists thrive and strive to go into outer space. But, there you have it. So in a lot of ways, your pineal gland and all of these things which relate to sleep patterns and it's kind of funny. It's like we're living this waking life, but during our waking life, during the day, we enter into dream states all along the way. And the pineal gland actually has a lot to do with this. And so when people actually relate the pineal gland to psychic and telepathic notions, they're not too far off, but they're just pushing it just a little bit too far. And you know, I'll get into another video here where I'll talk about people actually, you know, being, so to speak, in the same dream. And the reality of Inception itself from the movie isn't necessarily too far-fetched. And I'll get into that in an upcoming video. And it all relates, you know, back to the third eye and the ability for us to enter into an almost dreamlike state where we ourselves are allowing these waves to interact with our body or emit waves in and through a series of events which are merely extensions of our internal selves. And so cell phones in a lot of ways represent this extension of an internal component which we have naturally, you know, evolved over time to house. And the cell phone is just kind of like the physical manifestation of an internal component. And it's almost like, in a lot of ways, like I said, we're entering dream states during waking life in reality, where we're able to cross over into this spiritual dimension and almost this mystical and magical dimension and be able to accomplish these feats, which are actually much more scientific than people give credence to. And they're just such a day-to-day norm that people don't necessarily make the connection that it's like, hey, all of this writing that we're seeing about, you know, this mystical and magical actions, which have been described through eons of time, through myth and lore and legend, actually might have some sort of scientific basis upon that which it is, which is really going on. And maybe people in a lot of more ancient times understood this notion and these concepts in, you know, much greater detail and understanding than we give them credibility for. And, you know, we see this in their structures and in their writings. And the biggest issue and problem is that people try to utilize the language and their concepts and how they visualize things, and they, in a lot of ways, the actual meaning is degraded and lost as we find ourselves in another time trying to translate it, when in actuality they're talking about, in reality, the same thing that we're pretty much doing today. And so then we come across, you know, sacred geometry. And sacred geometry is something which a lot of mystical and esoteric people really love to get into, and they say, you know, it's all about harmony and balance and everything to that extent. Well, I come from a family and lineage of builders and of people which are heavily involved in the manifestation of these harmonious structures. And it's kind of ironic because these people, which are actually highly immersed in the work itself, don't take a second glance as to how magical and mystical it is. You know, it was no more important that the structure be this way than breakfast was that morning, but it's no less significant or important itself, because, you know, breakfast itself was important, because if they didn't receive nourishment and sustenance, then they themselves wouldn't be able to accomplish the feat itself. But it's just such a day-to-day norm for them that they disregard the whole mystical and esoteric side of it, where sacred geometry is merely the science of early engineering and engineering principles and of city design, where, you know, and however you want to describe it. I have, within this region and pocket of space, the earth itself houses nodes of energy. And accessing these nodes of energy is in direct relation to the structures that I build around them. Well, construction workers do this on a day-to-day basis. And like I said before, it's not really magical or mystical to them. It's just kind of like a no-brainer. Of course you're going to build next to the waterways. And of course you're going to build a city and things to that extent which will allow bodies of energy to maneuver themselves along these pathways and through different buildings which perform different functions. And it's all in direct relation to the landscape itself. I went on a little journey with some of my family, and we were actually scoping out some places to build or construct. And you know, a lot of these people view the world in such a different way. It's like, here's the resources, and you know, they're trying to gauge and estimate the flow of the city and of the interaction between different communities, how it's going to grow over time, and how people are going to themselves be able to maneuver themselves through these bodies or these structures, each with a different purpose. And you know, for them, it's like, of course they're building on hot zones or energy points of the earth. Yeah, because that's where life itself flourishes, where the water is, where the sunlight shines down and provides plant life to grow, where there's arable land. And it's kind of like a no-brainer for somebody who's in the field itself. But then you get people that come along and they make it like some esoteric and mystical thing when it's actually scientific. And in no way is either side wrong. They're just presenting the information in a different way. One is very bland and cut and dry, and the other tries to take a spin on the information and make it something which is almost like, you know, magical. When the fact of the matter is, it doesn't necessarily have to be magical to be magical. It's very practical and ordinary, yet we overlook these things and we designate them as, you know, simple things which really have no sensation or euphoric meaning within ourselves. When if we take the time to look at them in this way, they actually really do. Like I said before, you know, breakfast was kind of just like the normal day-to-day thing, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't necessarily important. And it's the same thing with sacred geometry. You know, our bodies, they build themselves in a certain way because that's just the best way that it actually works, given the constraints of reality and of the conditions of the universe. And so of course it's going to build itself that way. Any other way would be pretty much idiotic. And so yeah, we're going to see harmonious structures which are able to withstand the force that is acting against them and giving them the ability to perform the functions that they are designated to do. And as the conditions change, the required functions needed to survive change. And in doing so, it gives the possibility for our form to change. And possibly what is seen as actually harmonious could change itself as well. And so, in a lot of ways, this sacred geometry is being spun off just like this whole pineal gland thing, where it's like, yeah, these people were super interested in sacred geometry, but you guys are taking it to like a whole nother level, where it's like, it's kind of just like a no-brainer. Well, yeah, duh, it should be that way. But, you know, you're making it into something which is making it seem like just godlike behavior when it is godlike behavior. If you look at the universe as intelligence itself and as the universe as being God, but it's like they're trying to present the information as a magician. And, you know, people pay to see a magician, but they don't pay to see the trick that the magician is performing. And so in a lot of ways, we actually have to translate the message itself to give it practical application and giving it the ability to fit in with what we actually already know and allowing us to understand its meaning in the fullest effect possible today. And so there you have it. There's the whole relation between, you know, in a lot of ways, what many people take into the spiritual realm and the mystical realm, when in actuality it's very scientific and practical. And you know, I can sit here and talk about aliens and extraterrestrials. And yeah, I think aliens influenced a lot of ancient civilizations. I mean, the mere act of somebody crossing an ocean into another society would be deemed as an alien interaction. So yeah, you don't think that these people were communicating ideas to other civilizations, and in doing so were able to make advancements upon their understandings of the world and reality? So of course they have depictions in their artwork where they're saying, yeah, these aliens came. It's just a mistranslation. I could just as easily say foreigners came and they influenced our teachings and our understanding of the world and gave us a greater insight into, you know, how it is that we go about our daily lives. The same instance, you know, goes for a lot of language that is used, and many other things as well. If you can just, in a lot of ways, dissect the information and be able to analyze it in a way which takes away from the mere fact that people are just trying to perform a magician's trick on you, rather than present the information in the practical way in which it's understood. And in a lot of ways, you know, doesn't necessarily detract from the magical nature of what's really going on. Just like life itself, it's already pretty magical in and of itself to be experiencing this whole thing. It's just in a lot of ways, the way in which our society today is actually built doesn't necessarily allow us to really experience it that way anymore. It's kind of like people are out of sync a little bit. And it's because it's actually so structured and organized and so specified and being specific, we've lost our ability to really entertain everything else and lost the ability to really enjoy the fact that miracles are going on around us 24/7. And, you know, looking at the world this way, we're able to gain much greater insight as to the human experience itself, rather than just day-to-day life and the mundane actions which are required of life for us to live. I mean, when you look at society, it's really kind of funny. It's like you hear people complaining all the time that, you know, why is life this way? Why do we have to conform to all of this stuff? And it's like, I can't necessarily live because I have to make a living. So I'm not necessarily in the position or capable of experiencing life to the fullest, because in a sense, life is like pinning me down, and it's a wrestling match and we've all lost, and life is saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, but you have to do these things in order to live. And instead of everybody realizing that it's they themselves that are creating this reality that they complain about, they would rather just complain about it rather than actually revolutionize it. And, you know, like I've stated before many times, advancement through time itself isn't necessarily advancement towards some sort of ideology or of human experience, where in a lot of ways progression is relative, just like intelligence is highly relative to what it is that you're actually looking at and what it is that you actually want to achieve. In a lot of ways, people say, you know, look at our modern world, but in a lot of ways the human experience itself has diminished quite a lot from what it has been in the past. And so we really have to look at, is a lot of this stuff necessarily beneficial towards the goals and ideals which we believe would give us the best experience possible? Or are we merely confining ourselves to more of sort of like a prison where we have to meet all these requirements and demands which aren't necessarily required or necessities. I mean, let's look at life itself. What's really required for me to sustain life? It's pretty much I just need nourishment. As soon as I receive nourishment, that's all my requirements are met. There's nothing really beyond that. I mean, it's like our life has become so exacerbated now that our initial requirements are met, but we've created all these issues and problems that we now have to find solutions for when we ourselves created them. Because it's like people got bored of sitting around, so, let's make society. And let's make it so that in a lot of ways we take turns at being the slave rather than, us having slaves ourselves, which do everything we don't want to do. We ourselves take turns doing the actions and activities that we don't want to do. And so in a lot of ways that's how our society is today, but it's really so structured and organized. There's fences all over the place and walls and barriers and can't go here, can't do that. And people determine the norm, and it's like this norm of behavior is so restricted upon what it is that we can actually do. If you perform certain tasks and actions, then you yourself will find yourself being even more restricted. And in a lot of ways, that's just the consequences of life and of living in a society. And in a lot of ways, it has its ups and downs, its pros and cons, because people are able to come up and conglomerate with each other and perform and be able to accomplish tasks beyond that of a single individual. But at the same point in time, we have to cater to each other, which is in a lot of ways why we live in the world we do today, where we all take turns at being the slave, so to speak. And it's like the monetary system is when you have it, it's like you get to act as the king for the day, and everybody else gets to act as your slave. But as soon as you need it, you yourself have to perform the role of that who is doing work for those who are acting then as the king. And wow, this discussion has really gone off topic from what it was I initially started at, but whatever, it's rolling pretty fluid, so I'll just keep on going with it. It's a nice little walk, it's a nice day, it's bright and sunny out, the sunshine feels good. I'm really quite enjoying this, so I'm just going to continue on. But it's just really interesting. Life is super interesting when you look at the human condition itself and what it really is that defines our viewpoint of the world. I mean, people define the viewpoint of the world, because we grow up in this place where we are pretty much required to do certain things. And if we don't act on these certain things, and if we don't do them, then we're put into positions where we actually wouldn't be able to do pretty much anything. For example, if I don't necessarily want to play the game of Monopoly, and it's kind of funny because it's like, let's just say that you were playing a game of Monopoly with somebody, and then they won the entire game. Initially, everybody started off pretty much as equal, and due to mere statistics and luck of the draw, or whatever you want to call it, people ended up where they're at. However, what ended up happening is the game ended, and somebody bought all the pieces, and you went bankrupt. And then all of a sudden, it's like, you're like, okay, the game's over. I'm done playing. And the person who won came to you, and they're like, hey, let's play again. And so you're like, oh, all right, whatever, I'll play again. And so then you go to play the game again, and they say, hey, I'm going to keep all my holdings that I won in the previous game. And you're like, what are you talking about, dude? It's kind of stupid. I'll just be rolling dice and just paying you money then. And they're like, yeah. And so then you say, well, I don't want to play that way. And so you start to walk away, and then they come to you and they say, you have to play that way, or here are the consequences. It's like the natural consequences of life are no longer the most severe consequences. The act of me jumping off a cliff results in the consequence of death. And that's kind of like an interaction between me and the natural world, God, or the universe, or whatever you want to have it. Unless you yourself describe God as the collective consciousness and actions of humanity itself upon the landscape, and in interaction with and representing a dual relationship with the unconscious universe as many people actually see it. But in a way, we've built these consequences which don't necessarily follow like natural consequences, where it's like, if you don't do these certain things, then there will be consequence. If you don't pay me this money, there will be consequence. If you yourself don't behave in this manner, which is depicted as the norm by the majority of society, then there will be harsh and severe consequences. And you yourself will find yourself being even more restricted than you feel at this moment. And so it's like, oh wow, of course, yeah, I guess I'll play the game of Monopoly with you again, and just go around and whatever. So it's like, all right, sure, I guess I'll play, because it seems like I really have no other choice if I don't want to end up in somewhere that pretty much restricts me to like just a place that nobody wants to end up at, and really, really restricts what it is that the human experience and the experience of life itself is supposed to mean. And we can get into this whole moral and ethical nature of like human behavior, where certain actions are deemed to be appropriate. And it's so funny, because the people strive, and they they seek perfection, but when somebody achieves it, the person who achieves it is ridiculed by the rest of society, out of whatever you want to call it, jealousy and whatnot. And people love structure and order, but then at the same sense, people love a little salt on their potatoes. And so, it's like they're seeking out this unorthodox way of life to compensate for the fact that they're no longer receiving pleasure from the order that is all around them. Yet these same people that they seek out to receive pleasure from the mundane are the same people that are then ridiculed and held captive, even though they're fed, in a sense, by the normal nature of society itself, wanting and longing for something more than normal. But then what is more than normal is then ridiculed and itself put in a cage. And then we go back to the mundane nature of things once again. So you have this constant ebb and flow of all these different interactions, where all these consequences are, and a lot of them are just man-made consequences, where people are always striving for equality. It's funny. If you look at the individual versus society, because the individual is always striving to gain the upper hand, but society is always striving for equality, where, as soon as I'm within the larger group itself, and as soon as I associate myself with the group who isn't partaking in the benefits of another, then it's pretty much unequal. But if I myself am the individual who's partaking in benefits that I myself have achieved, which give me, in a sense, more freedom and the ability to do more with the life that I'm experiencing, whether it be through the mere act of me gaining persuasive advantage over others by the means of me accumulating massive amounts of monetary funds, I then, in a sense, have a larger and greater sense of freedom, where I myself no longer even have to play the slave. And I myself no longer have to be the one to take the turn, so to speak, in working for others, so that I can take my turn later on and eventually as the one who gets to order others around for the things that I want to do. And so we see this dual relationship present itself between society and the individual. And as the individual, we see certain things a certain way and want things a certain way. But as soon as we associate ourselves with a group of people who, in a way, aren't necessarily having the same advantages as this individual over here, it becomes sort of like a mob group that sees it as unfair and seeks to tear down the mountain, so to speak, that is the other person who has achieved and accomplished, or in a sense inherited, that which they have over the group which you're within. And so yeah, I've really diverged here from the initial point of this conversation, but I really enjoy kind of speaking my mind and being able to express my ideas in a way which helps me to overcome, in a lot of ways, issues and problems which may represent internal thoughts. Being able to merely express them and to be able to put them in a way in which others could possibly understand is really sort of therapeutic. And the more you do it, the more that you're able to effectively communicate a lot of these notions. And in your ability to effectively communicate these things, you then gain a greater ability to overcome them, because you're able to bring them to light, bring them to the forefront with other individuals who may be experiencing them as well. And the better you are at communicating, then the better you are at being able to, or the more likely and more capable you are at being able to overcome the obstacles at hand, because you can then communicate effectively and efficiently to actually organize a body and a group at large, which in a lot of ways has the same issues presenting itself within their life, and through means of communication overcome obstacles that you as the individual could not. So yeah, anyways, there you have it. Where do we start out here? The pineal gland, relating it to actual like daydreaming activities which we go through, which allow psychic and telepathic things. However, they're not so mystical and esoteric as one might think, and such as sharing dreams within the confines of entertainment and of sacred geometry, its importance within not only nature but within artificial components in which we utilize to harness the physical world around us. And by harmonizing with these structures, we're able to much more effectively and efficiently utilize them. And whether you want to call it, flows of energy through a body, or the flow of people through a city, it all is the same thing. And being able to spin the dancer in both directions and realize that people are saying the same thing, only using different words and forms of language, is a very effective tool when you really need to communicate an idea to a broad range of individuals. And being able to know, which pathway will incite more of a reaction and give it almost a sense of new light and new life, when in reality you're stating something which is very old and already known, which may in fact inspire action in the way in which you want. So yeah, I'm going to leave all of you with that, where we then derailed ourselves from that whole aspect and went off onto society and the pros and cons of a structured and organized body, where there's great possibilities and capabilities and lots of freedom, and But with this comes a loss of a lot of other things as well. You know, it's like we're always trying to escape this box, but what we have to realize is that outside of the box itself, another box will eventually present itself, which is limiting us. And so I think it's funny that humans really limit themselves when we don't necessarily have to. The universe itself will limit us, but people are so confined to the boxes of their own creation that we're not really able to unleash the full potential of reality and of human experience through the understanding of the universe itself, due to the fact that we've created rules within the game itself. You know, it's like we're playing a game and we've said, you know, we can't do this, this, and this, and this, even though it wouldn't result in death in the game. But it's like we've created all these rules which aren't necessarily detrimental to the game itself or our ability to play the game, but they certainly limit the amount of experiences that we can have within the game. But you know, a greater box always represents itself outside of the box you find yourself within, even if it's a box that you did not yourself initially create and one that merely was. Another box always presents itself outside of that one. So if you're always seeking to try and escape the box, then you're always going to find yourself within a box. And instead of seeing yourself within a box, always seek to see the potential within a box itself, and you know what it is that you can do while inside, rather than merely postulating and wondering what's on the other side and outside of the walls. So all right, everybody, thanks for coming along with me on this journey and taking a walk with me with my thoughts. And I hope that I kept the leash, you know, not too short, that we were able to find a sense of freedom, but not too long that we found ourselves floating around out in outer space. So, yep, thanks everybody, and see you next time. See y'all next time. My voice is going all out of whack, which is good. I'm exercising muscles that I don't normally exercise. Peace out, yo.